The truth is most runners mess up their threshold training completely. And most of the time it's not really their fault, they just don't actually know exactly what they're training for. In this video, I'm going to tell you the two types of threshold and how you should train for both and what each of them does. Okay, so firstly, you might have noticed I moved indoors and that's because it's January and it's a bit cold. But secondly, as I've just mentioned, there's two types of thresholds that you might want to know if you're serious about your running. Now, we've got LT1 and LT2. So you've got the first lactate threshold and then what comes after. Now, in terms of the abbreviations, you don't really need to know these too much, but you need to know what each one is and what it does because that's going to help your training. So LT1, the first lactate threshold. Now, this is just that first point where the lactate levels in the blood go above baseline. And that's all it is. It's still sustainable. You can still repeat it. You're not dying at this point. You're still very much, dare I say, comfortable. Now, why would you do LT1 training and why are you trying to improve it? Now, if you're doing this, you're trying to improve your endurance, you can help improve recovery, efficiency, fat usage. What it's not going to do is improve your ability to clear lactate or buffer lactate. That's going to come later with LT2. So you need to understand what this is. This is the engine. You're building the engine here when you're training LT1. Now, what might this look like? Well, if you're a beginner, it might even just be 20 to 40 minutes steady state running. Or as you get more confident, it could be 3 by 20 minutes. And then when you're experienced, it can be anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes. Either way, this sounds suspiciously like zone 2 training. And that's because it's really not too dissimilar. Most people just don't quite understand the difference. Okay, so I've migrated to treadmill now. So that's LT1, that's building your engine. What's LT2? Now, LT2 is what most people will describe as lactate threshold. So when you hear people talk about it, that's probably what they mean. Now, this is the highest point or the highest intensity that you can maintain while the lactate levels remain balanced in the blood. So it's that point right before you start to accumulate lactate quicker than you can clear it. And that sounds a lot more like what most people's definition of lactate threshold will be. But they just forget the first bit and they're thinking about LT2. Now, what does this look like and why would you do it? So you're doing this for performance-based reasons. You've got LT1 for the engine, you've got LT2 for performance. It's going to increase your performance ceiling, mostly because you're going to be able to hold faster paces for longer, and it's going to improve your ability to buffer lactate, so clear lactate. Obviously, that's something all runners want if you take it seriously. Now, what does this look like? Well, the key here is you want to accumulate as much volume as possible at this point. So doing loads of little short intervals is probably not your best bet. You're much better off doing something like 4 to 6 5-minute, 6-minute intervals. Or if you're a good runner, you might be able to hold this for 20 minutes if you're really quite good. But either way, you're looking for a few minutes and doing intervals of that as opposed to just doing 5 400-meter efforts close to failure. Now, you might be wondering why I haven't just done this whole video about LT2 and the lactate threshold that most people will be familiar with. And it's a very fair question, to be fair, but you can't have a really good LT2 without doing the LT1 work first. It's almost like you need to earn the right to do it. Because what's the point in having really high performance capabilities if your engine's rubbish? I'm sure we've all heard that analogy before, but people just actually understand what they're referring to or where it's coming from when talking about said analogy. Now, the difference between the two, as we've said, is that LT1 is always going to be quite calm and controllable, whilst really pushing into that second phase of your lactate threshold is going to be a lot harder and a lot more uncomfortable. But both should be relatively sustainable. LT1 should be able to maintain for ages because you're going to be at 65 to 75% of your heart rate. But LT2, you're going to be 85, 90% of your heart rate. In fact, you're going to be looking at the very top of zone 4, but just under zone 5 is a really good place to aim for if you're trying to hold those faster paces. And obviously, you're going to be able to hold this for a much shorter amount of time than you would for LT1. So I've said the letters LT so many times that I think if I say them again, I'm going to scream. So I'm going to try and keep this quick, but I couldn't really end this video without telling you how to actually test for this because the best way is with a lab. And I'm going to be honest, I doubt most of us have access to that easily. So let's start with LT1. Now, a good way of doing this is called an aerobic drift test. Now, all you're looking for here is that you're going to run 45 to 60 minutes and you're going to track the change in your heart rate at that time. So start your run, wait to see when your heart rate reaches its normal level, and then along that time, you're going to see how it changes. Now, if it rises by more than 5% while keeping the same pace and same intensity, then maybe you might not quite be LT1, and if it stays under that, you're looking good. Happy days. All right, and what about LT2? Well, this is going to be a slightly harder test, as you might imagine, but genuinely, I just suggest doing a 30-minute time trial. And the key points here is you need to not sprint too much at the start and not fade too much at the end. It should be the hardest possible sustainable pace, which is really hard to find if you haven't done it before. I appreciate. So you might need to give this a couple of goes. Now, you're going to track a couple of things. You're going to track your average heart rate for the last 20 minutes of that, okay? So just have your watch on, and then afterwards, look at the average heart rate for the final 20 minutes, so from 10 to 30 minutes, okay? This is just because there's gonna be an initial spike, and we do want to discount that data, really, okay? Now, the average heart rate is gonna be your target heart rate if you're doing LT work in the future, or LT2, I should say. And you're also going to track your average pace just throughout the whole run, because this is then going to be your target pace. So you'll leave this test having a target pace, target heart rate. Obviously, you can track how these change over time, and that can tell you if you think you're getting faster or getting fitter, or hopefully not slower. Now, I really hope this has made some sense, because if you are serious about your running, it is helpful to know these things, because then you can adjust your training accordingly. Now, whilst a newbie runner trying to do a 5K, you don't need to know LT1 and LT2. You just need to get running. That's the most important thing. But let's say you plateaued for a while, you want to maybe identify what's going wrong. So therefore, knowing the difference between these two, and instead of just blindly doing zone 2, hoping for the best, maybe actually attributing some testing towards it will be really beneficial to you. And the same for lactate threshold, or LT2, as you now know. So hopefully that's made sense. So now you know the difference between LT1 and LT2, you can start training them appropriately and actually get faster at your running.